Imagine being in a conference room, you're dealing with a problem, a supplier issue, customer abrasion, strategy, whatever. People are debating, there's uncertain direction, uncertain scope. I can see the person sitting in their seat. Before they would hesitate, they would look around, they wouldn't say much, maybe a single comment. When they're unleashed, they're like, thank you very much. I'll grab the pen and take over whiteboarding. That's when you know an individual in my mind is unleashed. They're commanding and facilitating and still being diplomatic and hearing all those things, but they are not a passive observer. They're a facilitator of the outcome.
Welcome to the Unleashing Leaders podcast, where we work with willing leaders to accelerate the changes you seek. We'll learn from the experiences of different leaders facing real challenges and distill practical, purposeful steps to apply in your context. I'm Lee Scott, your curious co-pilot. Together, let's make positive changes for our companies and communities.
Welcome back to the Unleashing Leaders podcast. Today is an amazing milestone in our podcast, as well in the relationship of the history of the guests that we have on here with us today. I'm your host, Lee Scott. This is our 50th episode. Thank you for all of our loyal listeners. And for those just joining us now, this is as great a place as any to jump in and start taking your leadership to the next level. Today, we have a guest here that I've known for literally half my life, a quarter century in the making. This guy is just such a pivotal memory and a figure in my life, and have learned so much of leadership from him and with him and about him. Please welcome me to the show, Cyrus Aram. Cyrus, what's up, dude?
Good morning, Lee Allen Scott. I can't believe it's been half the life. Man, you're making me feel old.
Little less for you, my brother, but still pretty seminal. So Cyrus, let me talk first about your formal title and roles, and then we'll talk a little bit about the informal ones. But right now, as I've got it, you are a TED Talk speaker. You're a highly regarded and highly ranked, sought-after UC Davis Graduate School of Management faculty professor in their management leadership technology courses. You are a CEO of an awesome consulting firm near and dear to both of our hearts called Unleashing Leaders, and you're a moderately competent tennis player. Did I get at least the primary roles down, aside from being the awesome husband to your great wife, Tanya?
I think that's pretty accurate. You got to also remember, I'm also the godson of your father.
Well, that's what's interesting about you and I. If we go through that title, buddy, I was thinking about it. It's like if there was a Kama Sutra for platonic relationships, you and I have been in like every position. I mean, we've been coworkers. You were my internal customer. You're an external client. You were my employee. Now I'm your employee. You're the godfather to my kids. You're in my wedding. I mean, you were a Sherpa for me when we camp. I think we've covered all of the grounds over the years.
I would agree, sir.
Well, excellent. Well, Cyrus, you and I know each other really well, but let's let our listeners know a bit more about kind of who you are and what are some of your origins. So tell us, today we're going to be talking about the hidden blind spots of leadership. And you started to get a pretty important education in leadership from a very young age and observing some things with your father. So tell us a little bit about where you had your first brush with leaderships in terms of your origins.
Sure. So, like very typical upbringing, I had a mom from Minnesota that decided to go to the Middle East in 1960, I think, in the early 60s, marrying my father, who's Persian. And I actually spent the first 7-8 years of my life in the Middle East. And for those of you listening, the Middle East in this particular country, Iran, where I'm half Persian, half Iranian, is very much in the news right now. And so I grew up there. And from those trails where my father ascended to lead healthcare for the country, we ultimately had to leave. And part of the revolution that you're seeing happening on the news right now is kind of what we went through. And so I had to come to the United States at an early age and start over, so to speak. By the way, wouldn't have changed any of that. But I did see at the highest levels of kind of international government what it means to deal with conflict and what it means to roll out change, and what it means to have integrity and not integrity. And so those are some of the stories I think I'll weave in today for the audience. Don't worry, I'm not going to get political, Lee. There's no political agenda here.
Hey,
But
it's your story, right? Exactly. But I think, we talk about conflict, we talk about challenges. You got to really see it at the highest stakes, where it was truly a matter of life or death. That puts things in perspective. I think sometimes when people get a little stressed out about stuff in the typical office. So I really appreciate the wisdom that brings. So fast forward then, so you got this early brush with, wow, these high stakes, high government positions and the challenges with all of that, which gives us a great appreciation for things that a lot of us take for granted, for sure. But tell us a little about your early career. What were some of your first roles as you ascended that leadership ladder, so to speak?
what I want to start with is I was a dropout. Well, what I mean by that is I was a law school dropout. And so I really early career was under a lot of pressure to go to a professional school. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. That's probably very typical for a 20-something person. Couldn't do chemistry at all, so I disappointed my father in not being able to be a doctor. But I tried law school, and Lee, I hated it. I hated it. Nothing against my lawyers out there. We need lawyers.
Bible roll, yep.
But I think what's important to know is that, starting and launching my career, I didn't launch. And so there I am, actually taking up a job that's called a runner in Hollywood, which is basically a fancy word for delivering scripts and getting cars washed for stars. And then I'm like, I got to do something different. And there, I got lucky, kind of like what Malcolm Gladwell talks about, being at the right place at the right time of an industry forming. And there was this thing called computers. And so I latched onto that and a company called EDS.
Now, Cyrus, when you say computers, are you talking about like an abacus, or what are we talking about here?
Yeah, my son always asks me, he goes, Dad, when I was your my age, what was your favorite website? I'm like, yeah, no. He's like, well, what was your favorite phone? I'm like, yeah, no. So these were early days. This is, 90s. This is early 90s when everything's starting, and I latched onto that
the whole personal computing revolution. Yeah.
Yeah. From there, I just started ascending and went to couple of big Fortune 500 companies, General Motors and a few others. And that's where the journey started, Lee.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And moving around those different industries as well. I mean, so you mentioned General Motors, that's automotive. You're in your childhood, you saw health, you jumped back into health as an adult, high tech with like HP and the like. And so give us what were some of the breakthrough projects that you worked on in the early 2000s that really started to kind of form and develop your leadership muscle?
Yeah, I'm going to first of all, I'm going to start off with the audience, and especially in today's world of AI, you're going to get just my own personal opinion. The first one is be a generalist. I didn't know what I was doing. I had some good mentors, and I'm like, hey, I think automotive looks pretty damn cool. General Motors makes some pretty amazing cars. And then I'm like, hey, how about transportation? And how about healthcare? And so I didn't really have a plan, Lee Allen Scott, till I got to my mid-30s, and I'm like, it actually makes you a better leader. So for those of you listening, if you can jump industries with transferable skills, point number one, do it. It'll make you better, stronger, no doubt in my mind. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, 100%. And to me, that what I would name specifically there, because I had a similar kind of experience, not at the same levels that you did, but a similar breadth. For me, when you stay in just one industry, you can develop deeper subject matter expertise faster, right? And that's super valuable. The challenge then is it's harder to see the patterns, right? Because you think this is specific to this industry. This is only related to, agriculture. This is only related to education, right? This is only related to insurance. And when you move across context, you're able to differentiate between this is unique and specific, and this is a pattern, right? And those patterns that repeat allow you then to be able to, while it might be a little bit slower start, it actually accelerates, in my opinion, your ability to really distinguish and think strategically, across any industry. So that's the specific reason I find value in that. And that's not for everybody, right? Like we need deep experts. We need deep specialists. That may not necessarily be the path for everybody.
Agreed. I do want to share, I've got 3 stories to tell, and they're briefly, so don't worry. But they all kind of unfold different management or leadership things. I wish I would have known at an earlier age, because I, like you, we've made mistakes and learned from them. And the first one involves bagels. So I'm going to leave the names of the companies out because I don't want to get in trouble. I like my life. Just imagine two very well-known technology companies leading at the time the largest technology integration in history. Yours truly was fortunate, not ready, not competent, but in the middle of all of it, trying to lead it. And ultimately, mergers and acquisitions, as you know, I think more than 50% fail. And they fail because of culture. And so at the time, there was a wonderful cafeteria and there was a bagel lady. And at the individual company we were merging with, she would greet you and she would say, well, good morning, Cyrus. How was your trip from California? Would you like sesame or poppy seed? And I'm like, poppy seed, please, bagel lady. I didn't call her the bagel lady, but, and then she's like, would you like lox with that? Oh, one serving would be great. And so you'd go through the line and it was a very personal, it was a very human, it was a very cultural appropriate norm for the target company we were merging with. And it was wonderful. Everyone loved the bagel lady, and there were good waiting in lines. Can you believe there were good waiting in lines, Lee?
Yeah, there was a way to start their day. There was a sense of connection. It was a sense of, having that personal touch. Yeah, this sounds awesome, man.
It
I'm already
sounds
getting a
great.
little bit hungry. Yeah.
Right? Yeah, I'll get you one in a minute here. But so then what happened was doing the due diligence and the actual integration. Unfortunately, the bagel lady was known as a synergy target. Now, for those in the audience who don't know what a synergy target is, a fancy word for saying we're going to lay the bagel lady off. And that's exactly what happened. And I will never forget the day after that happened, that story went around the world to Singapore, to London, to South America, to you name it, California, Palo Alto, and everyone heard that the bagel lady was fired. And that positive, hopeful merger became a hostile takeover. And so I learned there, lesson number one, Lee Allen Scott, culture trumps everything. If you ignore culture, it will bite you in the ass, excuse my language, eventually.
Yes, absolutely. Another, the more modern term, I think, for that the synergies is duplication or redundancy, right? It's like, well, hey, we've got other ways that we can source food. So, and it seems easy on the ledger to just like, well, that seems like a doubling up. Let's just get rid of that. But to your point, if it either jeopardizes your culture or it jeopardizes your organization's resilience to shocks, yes, sometimes redundancy is not inefficient. Sometimes a person that seems innocent in the role is actually pivotal to the culture of that entire organization. So wait, that's a fairly shocking wake-up call for that one experience. Did you ever find out what happened to her?
I did not. And bless her heart, right? Bless her heart, as they say in the South.
Okay. Well, okay. So that kind of was like a, whoa, wait a second. These relational details matter. What's another challenge that you then subsequently faced?
Well, I would say another one, just conflict. I mean, how many of us in a given week deal with conflict? Personality conflict, team conflict, role conflict, process conflict, platform contact. I mean, you just name it, it's conflict. And tribute to you, Lee, I've watched you over the years navigate some of the most challenging conflicts at the highest end of business. And you've done it masterfully. And I think one of the things that I would say to the audience is ABCs. I'll get to that in a minute. I'm a big believer in something called a framework, something that helps you navigate a problem. And promise I won't do a lecture right now on frameworks, but this is a situation where
we can do Professor Cyrus. We can do a little bit there. That's part of what this podcast is for. So.
Well, listen, I mean, as you know, Lee and I have got a bunch of wonderful young emerging career individuals, and they're doing incredible things with very little experience because of frameworks. So a framework is a proven template, instruction set, blueprint that can come from all kinds of nerdy places, from Lean Six Sigma or Agile or project management or Hoshin planning. The name doesn't matter, but you learn them and it helps you navigate. And so in this particular context, Lee, I had two really high-end managers on a really important implementation that couldn't stand each other. It was bad. It was one of those conflicts where when you walk down the hall and the other team sees you and which one are you associated with? Are you associated with hit manager 1 or 2? And then we'll get back on that.
You're literally like, am I going to get, tucked into a little conference room and roughed up here because I have the wrong allegiance right on the org chart, right? And it's, for those of you out there listening, if this hasn't happened to you, yeah, just give it time. It's one of those organizational, eventualities. There's gonna be two leaders that just don't gel. And that just has a huge ripple effect in the organization. But yeah, please continue.
Yeah. And so the ripple was that team members would avoid each other in the lunchroom, wouldn't make eye contact in the halls. It was very passive aggressive behavior. And so I tried doing all my leadership things and nothing worked. One manager was like, well, manager 2 comes in and she opens the blinds and I like the blinds closed. And manager 2 would say, well, I need to see out the window. And I'd like they were literally warring over blinds. And so enter the world of frameworks, because I was failing and I was about to lose my job and my team and the implementation because it was bad. And I learned something about ABCs, antecedent behavior consequence. And that's just a fancy term for, number one, you got to know the trigger. What's triggering the conflict? That's your antecedent. Number 2, what are the behaviors that are being created by that conflict? And number 3, what are the consequences of that behavior? And so I had someone else come in and teach us this ABC framework, but both managers are in, and we got to the actual root cause of the conflict, which had nothing to do with blinds, had nothing to do with what I thought it was. And we got into understanding that they had very different working styles. One manager name dropped with executives and took credit. That was a big trigger for the other one. The other one never kind of wanted to have an executive stage present. That was a trigger for manager 1. Anyway, the point is, it's a good example in my mind of conflict is everywhere. You can use ABCs to navigate it.
Yeah. Well, and I would go just one step even further to say, not only is it everywhere, but as a leader, you're actually generating conflict, right? I mean, if you've got a vision, if you've got a change, if you've got something you're advocating to achieve or a risk to avoid, by definition, that is going to generate conflict. So, being able to see beneath the surface as you did, it was like a kind of a radar that was able to penetrate past the clouds of the superficial things, to really be able to see what's the underlying, trigger, as you said, the NSC did, to be able to then understand the behaviors, those are things that are observable, visible, right? And I think what the alternative is, people start talking about, that's their assumptions and their feelings and their emotions, which are all important, are all magnifying it. But, but what is the behavior? Not the judgment, they're mean. No, what did they say? What did they do? What did they not say? What did they not do? Right. And then what's the impact or the consequence that has on it? I think that allows, again, you to see below all the dust to what's the actual architecture. And now you have choices, right? That doesn't mean everybody's going to be along happy ever after, but now you have conscious choices that you as a leader can make to try to restructure or change things. But
Lee, I want to ask you a question,
because you're driving it.
No, absolutely. I like the concept of just letting the dust settle once you have the insight. But you've managed a lot and you coach a lot of really different kinds of leaders, from supervisors to top executives, about managing conflict with staff. What's one tip you would have for our audience around conflict manager to staff member that you think is just really top notch?
I think what you're describing there, the pattern is, and it could be higher level manager to a staff, it could be a client to a vendor, right? But anywhere there's a power differential and the relationship, right? One's got a position or status or significance that is, significantly in order to magnitude greater than somebody else. I think what often happens there is the person in the position of power does either one of two things. Either one, they don't think it matters. And then they don't understand why the person they're in conflict with is freaking out, maybe more than they think they should. And they're like, it's just us working this out. And it's like, but, even if you used to be peers, when you're in a superior, so to speak, position, if you that can be discounted. On the other hand, you have folks think that just because you have the higher positions means you are always right and everybody else should just kiss your ring. And I think those are two extremes of conflict strategy, which, maybe there's a time and place for those, but to realize that power differential does cause, it changes the playing field. So the thing to remember from my perspective is just to do what you can to signal, if you're in the superior position in that sense, do what you can to signal to that person that you do value what they have to say. You do want this partnership, this relationship, this collaboration to be successful. Signal that you are willing to listen, and maybe even, let them talk first, for example, like give them the stage a little bit so that you overcome some of those things that'll cause it unnecessary anxiety, so you can get to the root of whatever it is that you're having conflict over. That's just one thing that I would say is be more mindful of that. I was not mindful to that at all. I was like, the person said check all the titles at the door. So we just checked all the titles, right? We can just get into it. Yeah, no, those titles did not get checked.
I like that. I like that a lot.
So there's the blind spot to culture that you mentioned, even when, we don't have time for that, right? The stakes are really high, big budget items, the importance of, personal standards and norms and rituals. You've got the blind spot of team conflict, right? Where it seems like we're arguing about one thing, but there's really something underneath the surface. What's another blind spot pattern that you could share with us? Let's back into the techniques behind it all.
For sure. The third one, I think, for me, that's been, again, I wish I would have known earlier in my life. It sounds like a Hallmark card, and some people may have hear this a lot. They're like, focus on the customer. Like, of course, like that's an obvious one. But I think what I'm going to reverse that a little bit, and I'm going to say, go belly button out. And I'm kind of lifting from Steve Jobs a little bit here, where a lot of people, a lot of companies design a process from their point of view, and they go belly button out. And I should say what I'm asking actually to do is the opposite of belly button out. You go from outside the customer back into the organization when you design a process, not vice versa. And I cannot tell you how many times that I've been involved in my career where companies may think they're designing outside in, they're not. Here's a real life example. So I call this one 3,000 records. Any guesses, Lee, what the records are?
I'm going to let you share. I know the story, so I don't want to spoil your thunder here.
There are times when people can create a lot of fire drills and drama, and that happens. And that's we get that in corporate America. This particular case, there was someone that was raising the fact that 3,000 records dropped and fell out of the system in an enrollment process. And I think it's such a great indication because we had every top executive involved. It was all kinds of noise, people working around the clock, and there was a lot of personality conflict once again. And the 3,000 records ended up being customers. They weren't records, but notice the language of the people involved who had never gone on a customer journey, never met with a customer, never been to a customer's shoes in that particular industry. And they're like, yeah, there's a 3,000 records that dropped out, resulting in some abrasion. No, those people didn't actually get an ID card that was critical. And so that's why language, when it comes to focusing on customer, and if you would have designed the process from outside in, going, we can't have 3,000 customers because that includes their families. Now we're at 6,000 customers. I think it's really problematic. So my lesson learned is you can talk a game about focusing on the customer, design the process from the point of the customer, and use language that's customer friendly. Lee, does that make sense to you?
It does. It means you've got to get outside of whatever your normal operating zone is, right? Go have some conversations with them, hear from them. And then to your point, language being so important. I mean, you and I, we sometimes, look at other organizations out there and they all have their strengths and their challenges. So anytime we point to one company, doesn't mean everything they do is just to worship at the altar. Right? That's one of the things that you and I think, both really appreciate is when it comes to these frameworks, we know the value of them, but we're also kind of agnostic. We're like, use the right framework for the right situation, right? Don't let the framework become the customer, use the right framework for the customer. But, you look at somebody like Disney, and when they talk about customers, they have very unique language for it, right? Customers are not, they're not the customers. They're not the transactions. It's not the snot-nosed kids. It's not the, the dumb parents. They're guests. And when they talk about their employees, they're not the rank and file, which that term drives me nuts. They're not staff, which reminds me of a staph infection. They're the cast, right? Like we're here to put on a show. And so, that's a very intentional framing of language. And yeah, when you say 3,000 records dropped out, I'm thinking like, what, Tower Records has been out of business for a while. What are you talking about? Is this like a Blockbuster thing? It's not data, it's people.
Yeah. And in fact, I don't want you to steal my thunder again, because here's my final story on this. It involves Disneyland again, because I don't know how you're inside my brain.
I didn't know you were going to share this one, so that's all right. Go for it.
Yeah, no. So Disney, they have these, Lee talked about this term Imagineers. What a great job. Like, don't you want to title that? I want that on my business card. Can you change my to an Imagineer? And they're responsible for completely designing an experience that's so memorable. Well, one of the cruise ships for Disney, one of the early cruise ships, everybody wanted to rent and book the rooms along the ocean with the balconies, and nobody wanted to book the rooms that are interior in the ship. And so once again, what did Disney do? They didn't use marketing techniques or sales incentive techniques. They brought Imagineers in who created a digital display of some of Disney's, most popular movies. So at night, the kids can have, Sleeping Beauty and Dora and all this stuff going across the screen while they're getting ready. And during the day, they had the equivalent of it's not a peephole, but what do you call those things in the ocean when you look out? It's like a small window. They had the equivalent of a porthole, and you could literally see when the ship's going above the water and below the water. Well, guess what? Those two Imagineering concepts and processes from a customer point of view resulted in those cabins being booked out.
Yeah. Yeah. It's again, not just assuming, oh, it's inherently good or bad. It's looking at what makes this one desirable, what makes this one less desirable, and then through literally their eyes, what are they looking at? What are they seeing at? How can we create the stories and the memories that they're looking for? Another great example. But you're right. Again, back to that kind of cross industry perspective. When you become a deep subject matter expert, which we absolutely need those, and we partner with those, and that's part of our business, right, brother? Is we try to unleash those subject matter experts as leaders so they can have a greater impact. But you start to think that you know more than the customer. And in some parts that's true. You probably know some aspects in a deeper, more nuanced, more intimate way, but the Mac in and of itself creates a blind spot where you're forgetting, what matters most to the customer, whether it's logical or not, what matters most to them. And that's what incentivizes behaviors, which is the antecedent, which then results in the consequence, which is a retained customers, better healthcare, safer transportation, whatever it is that you're doing.
And one last tip for my millennials and Gen Zs who I adore. And I think watch this, I'm going to get in trouble for this following sentence. This is a tip that I think is fire, and I want you to follow it so you don't crash out. You can spill the tea with your teammates later and not get cooked. All right, I'm pretty sure I got every word of that wrong there, Lee, but here it is. You got to talk to the customer physically. I know that is a strange concept.
Wait, no, but Cyrus, you're old, you're so old. No, dude, you can just jump on an AI chatbot and ask them. It's so much easier. Or you can Google it, right? Isn't there YouTube for this?
There is. The data and the nuance, what you were just saying about customers talking and their expressions in person or live, at least on a video call at a minimum, that's not going to change. AI is not going to replace that. And so that's just one thing that I find in earlier generations sometimes, maybe because of COVID, maybe because of devices, not as comfortable. The term I use is canvassing. Go look that up. But canvassing and getting out in front with people you don't know and strangers and deriving those customer insights, if there's one thing you remember from this discussion, I think that would be it.
Yeah, I was literally having a conversation with a millennial that's near and dear to both of our hearts, my amazing daughter, Sierra, who's interning with us right now while she finishes up some college. And she was, struggling with this thing. And she's like, well, I've Googled it and I've YouTubed it and I've, AI'd it and this, that, and the other. And I'm like, who have you talked to? And it's like, and I go back to one of the things I learned from Tony Robbins is whenever you think you have a how question, I don't know how to, or I'm stuck because of how. You don't have a how question, you have a who question. Who can you, I was like, pick up the phone, call this person or this person or this person. Do not don't just, ask people to spoon feed you. I think that's the alternative, right? The moment you have a question, go, don't make Cyrus your personal Google. Don't make the customer your personal Google. Do your homework for sure. But then as quickly as you can, get out there and start having those conversations. And the one thing I would add to that, Cyrus, and this kind of goes back to your earlier conflict question, one of the keys to solving conflicts is not being able to just understand the person with whom you're having the conflict. And it might be, like you said, a customer experience, might be a fellow coworker. What's more important than knowing what they want or understanding what they want, it's them believing that you understand what they want. And so even if you do know it, even if you are right, even if everything they say validates what you already have in your skull or on your spreadsheet, the conversation itself helps them believe and have certainty and connection that you also understand it. And that, my friend, is often what opens those doors to the right solutions at the right time.
Well said. Yeah, customers are smart. They know they're closest to the work. They're closest with the experience. You just have to pull out that key nuance, usually in
Absolutely.
person. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's do this then. So you've named a couple of examples, from, internal, external, large mega deals, small things. Uh, let's now kind of zoom into that and say, okay, what are some practical things that leaders can do to be aware that they have blind spots and to be able to better illuminate them for themselves and those around them? What are a couple of key tips that you would share?
You got always the right questions, don't you, Mr. Lee Allen? Let me offer this one. So just as just pure management, again, something that I struggled with for years. How do you know when to be strategic versus operational? How do you know when to be a thought leader versus being really tactical? How do you know when to show up in a meeting where there's people talking and you want to insert yourself? That's a tricky landscape. Do you have a better way of framing that, Lee?
No, I think that's one of the perennial ones. You hear that in reviews. You need to be more strategic. You hear that in conversations. You were too tactical. It's like, no, we gotta get down to the details. We're too theoretical, right? It's like that's that calibration exercise. And you've helped me many, many times over our relationship to kind of adjust and tweak so that we were at the right calibration for that audience, that moment. So absolutely a perennial challenge for leaders.
Yeah, and in my own reviews, there were times where I'm like, Cyrus, you have potential, which is code for you're not there yet. You're too in the weeds and too nerding out with Lean Six Sigma. And then other times we really want you to see your thought leadership. So it's hard. It's hard to know where. And I'm going to offer just a very practical 2 tips. Usually I do things in 3s. This is only in 2s. Because this is where it started turning for me, is like obsess about the language. And so when you hear terms like roadmap, strategic partnerships, integrations, levers, plays, you hear things around improvement, that tends to be strategic space. And leaders and individuals want to see you flex into that strategic mindset and demonstrate where you're going to grow the business, where you're going to cut costs. Let me just pause, Lee. Does that resonate with you, or do you have a different?
No, but just to extract that, the signal is listen to the words of the customer, of the audience that you're working with. And those are clues to say, we want to bring it up a level, right? We don't want to get down in the weeds on this one. So then on the inverse, what might be somewhere they're saying, hey, enough with the high level. We really want to get down to brass tacks. What would be some of the trigger words for those?
I would, and AI could be a good term for this, a tool for this as well, but just watch the words that are tactical, that are operational. Are we dealing with cycle time? Are we dealing with fallout, exceptions, fire drills, dashboards, red dashboards, like root cause analysis? Like those are, just separate the worlds and try to smell the language. That's part 1, if that works.
Yeah. So now your ears are kind of tuning into, what phase of the spectrum do I need to be looking at, right? Am I ultraviolet or am I more infrared? So that now all of a sudden things that, seem non-visible to me previously, just looking at the visible spectrum of life, I'm like, oh wait, we're in ultraviolet right now. We're strategic. These are playbooks. These are long-term strategies. These are, inflection points. Oh, all right, I'm going ultraviolet. Now I can see things that others are seeing, and I can help them see things that they need to see, or vice versa, into the other end of the spectrum. That's kind of how I'm interpreting that.
Yeah, I love that. Then just to close that out, and when I say this, I promise the audience I have no stock invested in Toastmasters. It's a nonprofit. So there are 2 things that I think are really important. Toastmasters, which is an international club where you just have to go out and speak in front of people you don't know. And that in of itself is a great process. And poker. And again, I am not advocating gambling. I think my son was out gambling last night, which we're going to have conversations when I get back tonight. But both of those...
When you and I play poker, I don't call it gambling. I call it paying for entertainment services, because we usually make you host, because you I think one time in 25 years, I've actually won, the night over you. But, I just look at it as like, hey, I'm putting money in, I'm getting entertained, I'm getting fed,
And there are people that I've been providing entertainment services for years as well, Lee Allen Scott, always someone better. But here's the wrap. Both of those activities, Toastmasters and playing poker, regardless of if you actually enjoy them, they force your ability to read micro expressions. And one of the things, I'm a very optimistic person. I'm loving where the many aspects of the world are going. One of the concerning things is with the 12 hours a day on devices, with remote work, with everything on video, we're losing as a species the ability to detect slight changes in expressions in the face and body that are signaling something. And I think you can't know the gear difference between strategic and operational until you get good at realizing, oh, that person right there, their thoracic swelling up with blood, they now are getting a little heated by the conflict. Oh, I think I want to switch gears and be more strategic. Yeah, right there. So that's what I would say is those are two, no regret moves to try to get better at knowing when to be both strategic or operational.
Well, and to your point, just to clarify, we're not abandoned, saying some Luddite position that says, never be on a meeting before, again, on Zoom. It's like, no, but when you are in person or, first of all, do everything you can to manifest those in-person moments and learn to train your eyes, because you're right, at the resolution we have on these screens, you won't see that. It's literally a physical data transmission blind spot. It's, oftentimes we think of blind spot, it's stuff that you can see, but you're not registering. In this case, we now have a barrier that is preventing you literally from even being able to see it, even if you want to. So take advantage of those in-person times to be able to register those things, look for them. They do mean stuff. We've had a couple of guests on here, Cyrus, referring to like the Moravian equation, the ratio there that, as a species, for eons, what all we had was body language, right? And then we developed some acoustical sounds and grunts. And then we got language. That was the last piece of it. And now we think that a text can somehow replace, all those other, conversational details. So make sure to take advantage of those opportunities.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. And Lee, can I share one final story if that's all right?
Well, it can't be final because I hate that word.
Sorry.
But you can share an additional one. And then I have a specific strategy question for you as well about another way to kind of get out of those blind spots that can perhaps cripple you. But go ahead, share your next one.
No. Go ahead. Go ahead and ask the question.
Well, we were talking about, go to the customer, be belly to belly with the person so you can see those micro expressions. I thought if you could share a beat or two on the role of mentors in today's evolving workplace.
Stop it. That's my story.
No. I want you to do this one first. It's my podcast, darn it. You're not the boss of me right now.
So what I've tried to do in the first part of the conversation is talk more about just some enterprise lessons learned and mistakes and blind spots, culture and culture eats strategy for lunch, conflict, and using frameworks like ABCs to navigate conflict, focusing on the customer, not just in words, but designing processes outside in. And now it's like more just individual management and leadership, development areas. And one of them is knowing the difference between a mentor and a champion and having them. Lee, I will tell you, this is something that I deal with a lot of young adults. There was one 2 days ago that's like, well, I'm going to law school. I'm like, great, good for you. I'm like, who have you talked to? Have you talked to a partner in a law firm? No. Do you know anything about billable hours? No. And I could tell you the same thing for individual people getting into, engineering and accounting and AI. And so it's back to, have 50 conversations before you're making a decision. But here's the net. A mentor and champion are different. You need both. A champion is like a cheerleader. Like, hey, you can do it. You're awesome. I believe in you. Go, go, go. You've got all the talent. They're positive. They'll lift you up. That's not enough.
Yeah. That's why half the equation.
Only half. Yeah. The mentor's keeping it real. The mentor's saying, you dropped the ball. You didn't follow up with this person. You have a hole in your resume, and it doesn't always feel good. And you don't walk away feeling great and all pumped up like you would with a cheerleader. Know the difference between mentor and champions. Go get both. Wait for it. Go get both across multiple industries. That, to me, my friends, is a no regret move. I got lucky. I really didn't know what I was doing. I had some great mentorship. My father pointed me in a couple different directions, and I feel really good about having the mentors and champions I have in my life. I wish everyone would have them.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, in the moment, it may not feel like they're supporting you, right? But it's like they're helping you see something that you didn't see before. Like you said, there's a hole in your story. There is a gap in your framework. There's something missing in your analysis. Your recommendation is not accounting for X. And I think, it's really, it's like parenting, right? It's like, when you love somebody and you want them to be successful so much that you're willing to have things be uncomfortable in the moment to support their success and their growth. That is actually the ultimate side of support. But I think so often it seems like, well, that you're not just endorsing or rubber stamping what I want to hear. So therefore you don't have my back. Therefore I discount what you say. And I think we miss out on the opportunity, even from folks that maybe don't have our back. They're just giving us really harsh feedback. And you're like, all right, well, look, I'm going to take that, because that's another way of, again, peeling back that layer of not being able to see something. Welcome it from wherever the source is,
And removing that barrier you talked about earlier, removing that barrier that's getting in the way of seeing people, process, tech, stakeholders, conflict in probably the right lens.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, Cyrus, you have shared a couple of great perspectives. You've also shared some specific frameworks. Just to kind of recap some of them, you started to there just a minute ago, right? But when you're in conflict, be able to kind of penetrate the clouds by being able to use the AVC. Right. What is the antecedent? What is the triggering moment where this stuff starts to flare up? Right. What's going on there? What specific behaviors show up? Are they productive? Are they helpful? Are they not? Right. And then what is the consequence? What's the impact for it? Because maybe there was an intention, but that wasn't what became the consequence. So that was a big one. You talk about being able to spend time when you're in person, beginning to learn and build your skills, whether it's through Toastmaster, poker, or just day to day. You talked about, going to the customer, getting outside and building processes and solutions from the outside in. So these are just like 3 of about 478,000 that I know you have. So where can folks, follow you, stay in touch with you? You can get a copy of your dad's book, which was amazing. Tell us a little bit about how we can stay in connection with you.
I would just offer LinkedIn's the best area just to connect. And, I need to be more active, but that'd be the great area just to connect, follow some storylines and start a dialogue. And what I would also say is, we and I continue wanting to learn. There's a great quote: everybody teaches, everybody learns. You can learn from anybody. And even though I've been doing this and older than you, brother, and 30,000 hours, there are great people early in career I'm learning from all the time. Everybody teaches, everybody learns, and let's keep learning from each other.
That is excellent. And then one last plug. Tell us a bit about your dad's book. This is required reading for all of my children. What is the name of it? And we'll also put the link in where you can get it at Amazon or whatever.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, for those of you that are just watching world events, it might be relevant. It's called Escape from Tehran. And, my father was a great man that ascended to lead healthcare for a country, then was thrown in jail, then had to escape jail, then met back with his family in Minnesota. We had 2 Persian carpets and I think $8,000 and started over. And so it's a story about that, and a story about how to kind of really leadership and some of the things we've already talked about. So,
I mean, the people who helped him escape were the people that he had always, had been the customers, had been the people he had served. When everybody else kind of looked their noses down on them, he looked them in the eye and built value for them. So, it's a romance, it's an adventure, it's, got massive economic and political insights in it. So, definitely appreciated you sharing that nugget with us. So, we'll check that out, Escape from Tehran. Cyrus, brother, thank you so much for being such a pivotal figure in my life, in the communities that you and I have the opportunity to contribute in. This has been epic. Really appreciate you being on the show. I have one closing question for you, and I ask all of my guests this. This actually came from our buddy Darren that asked me early on. He said, hey, ask every guest this question. So, you ready?
I'm ready.
You're ready. Okay. So the question is this. There are many aspects to it. So I'm only asking for one aspect. But what is one aspect that you would be able to tell that somebody was operating as an unleashed leader? What might be that tell for you?
Darren, what a great question. I already know what it is. It's grabbing the pen. Imagine being in a conference room. You're dealing with a problem, a supplier issue, customer abrasion, strategy, whatever. People are debating. There's uncertain direction, uncertain scope. I can see the person sitting in their seat. Before they would hesitate, they would look around. They wouldn't say much, maybe a single comment. When they're unleashed, they're like, thank you very much. I'll grab the pen and take over whiteboarding. that's when you know an individual, in my mind, is unleashed. They're commanding and facilitating and still being diplomatic and hearing all those things, but they are not a passive observer. They're a facilitator of the outcome.
Yeah. They're not in the audience. They're not in the stands. They're on the field now. And when they have that pen, to your point, right, it's not just, writing down what you think. It's eliciting and capturing and framing what others think. And so now you're on the field. Now you're concentrating and you're putting yourself at risk. So that means you're out there.
And Lee Ellen Scott, thank you for allowing me to grab the pen and be able to lead this great company and lead our business and learn the things that I'm learning as well.
Absolutely. Wouldn't have it any other way. Thank you for the journey, my friend.
Thank you for joining us today on the Unleashing Leaders podcast. Subscribe so you don't miss a moment that could be the key to your next breakthrough. Let's stay connected and contribute together by grabbing that @Unleashing Leaders handle on LinkedIn, YouTube, or your favorite network. This is Lee Scott. Keep learning, loving, and leading. Our future and our communities are counting on us.